Magnus Carlsen, the Norwegian chess giant with an astounding rating of 2882, is undoubtedly the most remarkable chess player in the history of the game. Dominated the chess world, achieving an astonishing winning streak of 125 games without losing a single one. However, it may come as a surprise that Magnus Carlsen faced defeat at the hands of a player with a rating of 2593. This exceptional player is none other than Nodirbek Abdusattorov, a 17-year-old chess sensation who holds the distinction of being the youngest player ever to attain a rating exceeding 2400. Nodirbek initiates the game by moving his pawn forward to c4. Magnus takes some time, about 20 seconds, to think before responding with his knight to f6. The first few moves unfold and the game switches to a strategy called the English opening. White has knights on c3 and f3, while black has knights on c6 and f6. Magnus develops his bishop, simultaneously attacking the knight and threatening to capture. Nodirbek seizes the opportunity and launches a huge attack on Magnus's bishop. After a couple of more moves, Nodirbek decides to capture the bishop with his knight and Magnus captures back with his pawn. Nodirbek skillfully shifts his bishop to b2, and Magnus counters this move by capturing the knight on f3 with his bishop, forcing Nodirbek to recapture with his queen. A few more moves unfold and endgame genius Magnus decides to throw a surprising queen trade. He slides his queen to f6, offering a queen trade to Nodirbek. But it's important to remember that Magnus is known for being incredibly skilled in endgame situations. He can often find ways to win, even in seemingly simple endgames. Nodirbek promptly rejects the queen trade and retreats his queen back to d1 square. It was a sobering moment, much like the one you'd have if you missed subscribing to Horsey. So, don't be a pawn, be a winner. Hit that subscribe button, please. Both players start maneuvering their pieces to more active squares. Nodirbek shifts his bishop to g2, while Magnus hops in with his knight to e6. Nodirbek decides to castle his king to safety, and Magnus thinks for some time before launching an attack on black's kingside with his pawn. To counter this move, Nodirbek slides his bishop to a more active square, h3, and Magnus instantly replies with pawn to h5, threatening to kick the bishop back. So, Nodirbek decides to trade his bishop for the knight, and Magnus captures back with his queen. Then we see a pawn exchange on f4 square, which leads Nodirbek's king to be wide open. A few moves later, Magnus again throws a queen trade, and instead of accepting this trade, Nodirbek slides his queen to f3, defending the pawn on h4 with his queen. Magnus decides to castle queenside, and after a couple of moves, Nodirbek slides his rook to g6 square, and Magnus instantly replies by moving his rook to g8, offering a rook trade. Nodirbek slides his rook to g1 and Magnus decides to trade the rooks. Nodirbek captures back with his pawn, to which Magnus counters by moving his other rook to g8. The best move for Nodirbek is to pin the knight with his queen, but instead of this move, Nodirbek decides to move his pawn forward, which leads to the exchange of their remaining rooks. Nodirbek seizes the opportunity and captures the free pawn on h4. A few moves later, we see another pawn exchange on c6 square, which slightly favors Magnus. The players continue to move their pieces around, and several more moves are made before any significant developments occur. Eventually, two pawns are exchanged. At this point, Magnus realizes that it's highly improbable for him to win this situation. Nodirbek possesses a passed pawn, and with only a few pieces remaining on the board, Magnus must ensure that Nodirbek's pawn doesn't advance to promotion, as that would put him in a losing position. Magnus moves his knight to g5, attacking both White's queen and king. This forces a trade of bishop and knight, which will help Magnus stop Nodirbek's pawn since his bishop won't be there to assist anymore. Nodirbek checks Magnus, which is a fun move against the world champion, although Magnus doesn't seem too happy about it. Despite the reactions, the game is still in a balanced state, with both players making great moves. But things are about to change, as you'll see in a few moves. After checking Magnus's king, Nodirbek plays h7, threatening to promote his pawn to a queen. Magnus cannot allow this to happen, so with little time on the clock, he plays queen e5. Although this move defends the promotion square, it turns out to be a mistake, but only if Nodirbek spots the move, queen to d1. Fortunately for Magnus, Nodirbek misses it, and the game is back to being even. Magnus then retaliates against the earlier checks by thoroughly checking Nodirbek, making sure White cannot promote. After all these checks, things appear to be going well for Magnus. It finally looks like the game will even out and conclude with a hard-fought draw. But in this crucial moment, Magnus makes a critical error. He advances his pawn one square, opening the door for Nodirbek to play a devastating move, queen to d2. This move compels Magnus to make the only move that doesn't result in a check. The best move is to play king b1, but unfortunately, what Magnus overlooks is that it results in a check on the square his queen is supposed to cover. Magnus quickly resigns as Nodirbek has forced a queen trade. After the exchange, Nodirbek's pawn is free to be promoted to a brand new queen, effectively ending Magnus's chances of winning the 2021 World Rapid Chess Championship and passing the crown to a new champion, the 17-year-old super talent, Nodirbek Abdusattorov.